Serious, have you ever suffered with something you didn't know was a medical condition until a doctor told you? What happened? When I was a teenager I had an extreme pain in my heel that would make me limp, which lasted for over 3 years. I went to the school doctors and he said I was pulling a muscle. I get ridiculed for faking an injury which has lasted this long. Now fast forward. I go to a new school. The pain is still as bad as ever. The PE teacher thinks this is very strange and has seen the same symptoms before. Go to see the new school doctor and is diagnosed with Achilles tendonitis. This is when the bones grow too fast for the tendon in the heel and the joint between tissue and bone is torn. Any running I tried was in fact making it worse and wouldn't heal. I started physiotherapy 3 times a week and it completely heals in 2 years. I was called Achilles for Keratoconus, as the other kids thought I was faking. Again, TL doctor had undiagnosed Achilles tendonitis for 3 years and was in a lot of pain and limped when walking. Even saw a doctor which dismissed it as a pulled muscle. Took 2 years of physiotherapy to run again with no pain. The thing about the Achilles tendon is there's pretty much no muscle where the tendon is. If you point to the tendon and say that hurts, then no one should say it's a pulled muscle, because there's no muscle there. Things I discovered after I looked into my Achilles pain. When I was 17 my mother thought I slept a lot more than normal and I was always pretty tired, so we got some tests done. Turns out I am highly gluten intolerant along with a long list of other things. Milk, eggs, coffee, garlic, certain fish, egg. My doctor said I had the blood organ function of a 70-year-old. That along with other unusual problems for my age such as bad joints, excessive tiredness, loose poops, weight gain and painful bloating. I had hypothyroidism and a moderate case of malnutrition since my intestines were in such bad shape. I was so used to the pain and used to eating that food my body was bogged down and couldn't even react. Though as I got better my reactions got worse and I would become immobile while it felt like I was digesting knives. Years later I have turned it all the way around and am healthy. So glad I got it checked out. I thought everyone always felt kinda crappy after they ate and that I was super lazy. Turns out I am a bit of procrastinator, even healthy. This isn't quite a doctor, but I found out a month or so ago from an Ascredit that I have exploding head syndrome. Essentially every so often just as I'm about to fall asleep I hear the loudest noise imaginable. It's low and trails off slowly. Basically it's like an old cannonball shot. Strange thing is it's the loudest sound but it doesn't hurt as it's not actually happening, rather an auditory hallucination. I have this on occasion too, and like you discovered it when reading about it online. What a weird thing it is. I have found it happens most when I'm stressed, so if I try to relax before bed it doesn't happen as much. When I grew up, other kids, even in high school, would comment on my heavy breathing. I was always out of breath during any exercise and climbing stairs. When I was 21, I lived near a tunnel outlet and couldn't sleep because I couldn't breathe. Went to my doctor of many years and complained. His response? You have asthma. Excuse me. He repeats and gives me prescriptions for 3 different inhalers. I grew up in a household with always at least 3 dogs, sometimes 5, puppies every year, and parents that didn't mind if the house was spotless or not, to say the least. In one meeting with the doctor, my entire out-of-breed life explained. Mind blown. Yes, Waterhouse-Friderichsen syndrome. It is a bilateral hemorrhage from your adrenal glands. If people survive, they often recover some function, but mine hemorrhaged so profusely that they were toast. So, now I have primary adrenal insufficiency and I get to take crap tons of pills, like corticosteroids and things to keep my blood pressure up and some other stuff, or I will die. That smiley face. I like you. I for a few years had severe heartburn, but I suffered through it. Baking soda and Tums became my best friends. After about 2 years, a new trend starts. My chest begins to hurt, usually after meals, and it just gets worse. Soon, I feel bloated constantly, and I start losing my appetite. I ended in the hospital a few days before Christmas. This was back in 2012, because I hadn't eaten for 3 days and finally vomited up what I had for supper 3 days prior. Not to mention it felt like a monkey was using my heart for jungle gym. And nurses basically laugh at me and say I have gastroparesis and acid reflux. Gastroparesis is when your stomach fails to empty its contents when there is no blockage present. The nurses pat me on the head and say there is nothing they can do. Oh wait, lose weight was an option. And to basically get over it and give me useless antacids. Fast forward about 4 months after that endeavor to the year and my sister is now on a health kick. She wants to go dairy free and gluten for a week. Being the supportive big brother I am, decide to help her out and join her. After a week on this diet it was as if I never even had any gastrointestinal issues to speak of. After a week of no wheat and no dairy, it was night and day. So needless to say, I found out I grew into a lactose intolerance and wheat intolerance. I'm so sorry, I had lactose intolerance as a kid, and it was the worst. Somehow though, I grew out of it. I hope the same happens to you. Though as a kid, nothing could have stopped me from eating chocolate and ice cream anyway, lol. I remember freaking out the first time I had a panic attack. I generally, though my heart had stopped, or was about to explode or something. My mum thought I was faking an illness, and in all fairness something I need a lot to get out of school. I saw my psychologist the next day and she explained. Also being told that thinking about killing yourself every day wasn't normal. I honestly thought that was something everyone did, but telling school nurses, doctors etc, they were always really shocked and were sure it wasn't normal. Also being told that school phobia was a real thing. My parents were sure it wasn't a real thing, but all the health works said they believed it was a real phobia lots of people had. I was told throughout my early teen years that these episodes I'd described to my doctor were probably some kind of panic attacks, despite the fact that I had no more anxiety than your average angsty teen. It was only when I finally had a grand mal seizure at 17 that I learned they were simple partial seizures, and I have temporal lobe epilepsy. I thought it was normal to not enjoy life, to be living moment after moment, action after action, just waiting for it to end. I thought most people had to talk themselves into leaving the house. They had to convince themselves to do stuff they enjoy doing, like playing video games and whatnot. Man, depression sucks butt. I did some volunteer work for school unloading pumpkins for a church thing. Pumpkins are heavy and it started raining. They said we could still work in the rain. I was pushing a wheelbarrow with no stand thingy in the back and it started tipping to the side. I slipped a little, and in an effort to make it not fall on me, I pushed it really hard to the side. It fell, but so did I. Hard, my back hurt really bad and I thought I just had some bruising, so I waited it out. It was winter and the pain kept getting worse and worse with the cold, and it started to spread. Months passed. I kept thinking it was because I had bad posture that was catching up to me. There was no way it could still be from the pumpkin thing, right? The pain got to the point where I started walking with a limp because it began spreading down my leg. Finally went to the doctor. It was sciatica. Nerve that runs down your spine was messed up. No cure, just pills. Pills weren't enough, and I got some nasty side effects, so I stopped taking them after my health insurance ran out. So I've just been dealing with the pain for a few years. It's alright most days. Some days it's unbearable. Family keeps telling me to man up, that it's all in my head. I wouldn't wish extreme sciatic pain on anybody. I feel like an old lady in a 20-year-old body. Burning mouth syndrome. Every so often when I eat, the roof of my mouth feels like it's on fire. Anything that touches it hurts and feels tender and swollen. At first I thought it was an allergic reaction, but it wasn't happening with any specific food. Finally I asked my doctor about it. There is no real cure, but eating yogurt can help. Also, it gets worse and more painful if I go an extended period of time without eating. I realized recently that I have visual snow. It basically means your vision constantly kind of looks like a snowy television or a noisy photograph. I thought everyone's was like it. When I was a little kid, my parents homeschooled me. Well, I often complained about bad stomach aches, to the point where it was just about every day I'd get a stomach ache and really not want to do school or anything. Parents never believed me and always gave me so much crap for being lazy and lying and trying to get out of school. A few years later they finally took me to a doctor, where it was discovered that I had a bad peptic ulcer in my stomach. I got a serious regimen of antibiotics and heartburn medication, and 10 years of I told you so, giving me a free pass to actually lie about feeling too bad to go to school. As a bonus, During the time I was suffering from this ulcer, my family and a bunch of other families working as missionaries got to go to a beach resort for a week-long conference. Every single person there got food poisoning except for me because my stomach hurt too much to eat. When I was 5, I was active enough that I climbed to the top of a waterfall in Yosemite, which was a fair bit of a trail. However, I started going downhill not long after that. I got less and less active as it got harder and harder to be active. I played sports, but I was increasingly clearly out of shape. I found it painful to try to ride a bike and had no endurance. By the end of elementary school, my mom was yelling at me for walking funny, and I would wear out the inner side of shoes first since when I'd walk, my ankle would be nearly on the ground. Turns out, there's a misalignment in the bones of my feet, so I wasn't using the right muscles to walk, which meant walking, running, etc. were really difficult. I got some corrective inserts made out of hard plastic, and had surgery on one of my feet my first year of high school, although I've never been able to have the surgery on the other foot. Today, when I step out of the shower, I see two different footprints. The foot that had surgery has the heel and toes, and the clear indications of the arch. The other foot is a perfect outline of my foot flattened, with the inside of that footprint being a straight line from my big toe back to my heel. Not terribly pleasant, but from when I was a child I had a fairly low pressure when peeing. Not something I readily chatted to people about, so I never knew it was odd. After a couple of closely spaced tutors in my late 20s, went to a doc and had to have minor surgery to fix it. Although I don't really consider dong plus scalpel in any way minor. Had to have a catheter in for 10 days. Not fun, but I pee like a racehorse now. When I was 16 I had spontaneous pneumothorax. I was at a youth center playing pool and I felt really short of breath suddenly, and there was a very sharp pain in my chest. I called my parents to come get me, and after a while at home we went to the hospital. Turns out my lung had collapsed. Spontaneous pneumothorax is when your lung collapses for no reason at all. There are things that could lead to it, such as smoking, which I didn't, or being tall, which I am, but ultimately it can happen to anyone. I've had 8 of them. They eventually chemically scarred the outside of my lungs to the pleural wall so that when they do pop holes they can't deflate. When I was maybe 12 or so, I developed this small itchy patch of skin on the back of my neck. It never went away, but sometimes it would be really itchy and sometimes I wouldn't notice it at all. This went on until I turned 21, and over time the patch had spread until it stretched nearly across the hairline on the back of my neck and moved up a couple inches into my scalp. I was becoming more stressed out and that seemed to irritate my skin. So I scratched more and more until it hurt too much to bear. Went to the doctor. Had like 3 people stare at the back of my neck and head saying, "Oh wow, this is interesting," and then I was told I had psoriasis. Got prescriptions for special skin cream and oils for my scalp, and I'm happy as a clam. I never really mentioned anything to my parents about my skin until recently because frankly I never noticed it, or it just didn't bother me as bad as it does now. In hindsight also, I'm sure I thought I was just stressing out from the bullies and that was what made my skin so irritated. In fact, when I happen to be under a lot of pressure I'll feel that area of skin begin to itch even though I've been treating it for a year now. Frick psoriasis. I get it on both my elbows. If it wasn't so itchy, it wouldn't be as bad. I'd been feeling not myself for about 2 years. Coincidentally, I'd stopped taking the contraceptive pill at around about the same time as the feeling of being not myself started, and I thought that must have been the cause. I didn't seek medical attention, and assumed the extreme fatigue, bloating, acne and depression would eventually sort itself out after my hormones rebalanced themselves. I remember telling my friends how miserable I'd been since coming off the pill, how my body had changed, how I felt like I'd aged 10 years in the space of 2. So I went to see the doctor for something unrelated, and she asked me about the lump on my neck. What lump? Well, a blood test, an ultrasound, and a biopsy later. The unimaginable happened and I was told that I had thyroid cancer. 2 surgeries and a round of radioactive iodine treatment later, and I'm in remission. The entire saga lasted 3 months, from diagnosis to the date of the full body scan that gave me the all clear. It all feels like a bad dream now. I was always tired and losing weight. I thought it was just the stress of finals, but it was actually because I had thalassemia minor. I always knew I had anemia, but it never really bothered me much before, aside from my bad habit of always eating ice and having a cold nose. I got on a regular iron pill, and I gained back all of my energy. Not gaining weight, but I've always been underweight anyway. Good thing I found out though. It was extremely frustrating always being tired and passing out like 3 times a day. I never realized my hands and feet constantly feeling cold and numb during autumn spring was a medical condition until I found it in a textbook in the first year of my medical degree. It's called Raynaud's phenomena. Thankfully I can take medication when it gets really bad so I can still play instruments and write, as it slows your ability to move your fingers precisely. Raynaud's fist bump. All the women in my family have it. So far my brother and my daughter are in the clear. I was 25 when I found out that it wasn't normal to have headaches every day. I'd had them since I was 8, and by the time I was a teenager many of them weren't just headaches, but migraines. I spent a few years taking epilepsy medication to control the migraines, but eventually figured out how to manage them by dealing with stress and avoiding trigger foods. I still get them occasionally, but it's not every day anymore. About every 2 weeks I would get an extremely uncomfortable bloated feeling in my stomach. Didn't matter what I ate. I tried all kinds of antacid and upset stomach meds. Nothing worked except throwing up. Then I'd have instant relief. I dealt with this for about 10 years. Finally one doctor thought an MRI was needed. Found out I had an impacted gallbladder. Had surgery. Got it removed and life has been bliss ever since. No more worrying when I go out or if this will be the night I can't sleep and have to puke. Minor scoliosis. I've always had back pains but I just figured it was growing pains, just me being tall. I mentioned my arm was in consistent pain to a doctor because I was worried about carpal tunnel. She had me touch my toes, looked at my back, and informed me I had scoliosis. Naturally, I thought of some pretty horrible stuff. I'd always assumed scoliosis meant your back was growing at a 90-degree angle and you had to strap yourself in a brace to save yourself. The doctor calmly explained to me that I had a benign kink in my upper back that probably developed sometime during one of my growth spurts. It wouldn't get any worse. I just had to watch my back and not overexert myself. I also didn't realize my intense times of the month actually were a medical condition and not just normal times of the month. I can't remember the name, but it's essentially period. Fuck how. I take BC to handle it now. Thank goodness for that. I ran around in gym class my freshman year getting severe muscle aches the next day and always thought it was because I was in poor shape. Turned out that I was actually exercising and eating too many foods with high carbohydrates that I would wake up the next day with lowered potassium levels. In 2008 I was diagnosed with hypokalemic periodic paralysis. I knew my dad had some medication I wasn't supposed to touch in the cabinet growing up cause it could kill me. Found out after that day that my dad has it and so does my half brother. I've had terrible back pain for a good portion of my life. I always just dealt with it, but when I was 18 I went to the doctor about it and it turns out I have scoliosis. So much for all those scoliosis checks I went through in school. I didn't know I had a fatty liver for 8 years until I went in for something else and had blood work done. Apparently I was diagnosed with it back in 2003 but nobody ever bothered to tell me until around 2011. A lot of stress, anxiety, etc. followed. Lost a bit of weight and recently had new blood work done that says everyone was a-okay. Massive sigh of relief. My doctor put me on a supplement called milk thistle as a supplement to aid liver health. My doctor put me on it for my fatty liver disease. You should see about taking it if you want to keep the glorious gland in check. During the summer of when I was 11 my family went to a wedding out in Vancouver and decided to rent an RV. We packaged it up with a wild bunch of regular camping junk food so we had all the sugary drinks and sugary foods a kid could ask for. This began the worst summer of my life. I did not know at the time but I had made the final stretch into type 1 diabetes. I lost a significant amount of weight, 25 lbs, but no one thought anything of it cause I had grown 4 inches over the course of the year. During the school year I had regular pee times and would always need to go and get a drink, so near the end of the year she would just let me leave class without asking. So the 2 weeks is rolling by and I am pee every hour and crapping just liquids, or I am so horribly constipated that I would just lock myself in the washroom and sit there with a book for most of the day, which helped cause I could just keep on pee. Once we get back home I start sleeping during all points of the day and being awake for about 5 hours each day in total, but I would never feel rested and I would always wake up begging for water. I remember asking my dad what it could be cause I knew that there was something wrong, and he said, well, pirate jet, it could be diabetes, but don't worry, it isn't just some minor thing that we will get checked out. This conjured up images of the fat, diabetic girl who would always cry at lunch and eat weird foods, and so I was horrified cause being a little kid I had no idea about the facts. The day I was admitted to hospital was probably the best day though, cause I finally had answers to what was going on. I had been eating some jello and just passed out in the kitchen. My dad saw me lying there and picked me up in his arms, put me in the car, and drove off with my mom to the adult hospital. I woke up in this blue room with this doctor standing over me telling me, pirate jet, you have diabetes, and all I could say was darn, well that sucks, and then I passed out again. I kept waking up every 20 minutes because they were moving me. My parents had brought me to the adult hospital. I got to ride in an ambulance and all I remember is being so thirsty lying there strapped down and seeing this nurse drinking one of those small apple juice containers, and I just looked at her with so much longing that she just ended up throwing the thing away with all the juice still in there. After that I woke up again with needles in my veins and I think I soiled myself. Now I have managed it for the last 9 years and I would not change it for anything in the world. It has done so much for me that I cannot look at it as this thing that stops me from doing things, just makes me try harder to achieve. It is how I keep raising the bar, and for some reason girls love asking me about, so that is a bonus I guess. TL doctor, got diabetes over the summer. Around last year my right eye started seeing double. I wear glasses, so I thought my eyes were just being weird and it would go away. It kinda got worse, but I ignored it. Luckily my optometrist sent me to get checked for keratoconus. It's a condition in which your cornea turns into a cone shape, like a football. Sadly no surgery to fix it other than a cornea transplant, which they only do if it's severe. There is surgery that stops it from getting worse, which I'm considering. At least I can wear hard contacts and my vision then becomes good again, but no LASIK for me. I had anemia and I would become dizzy, and during the time Aunt Flo came to town, I'd be 3 times as dizzy and pass out sometimes. I figured it was just side effects of being a woman, but then finally on those times it had gotten bad. I felt super cold, I lost my appetite so I wasn't eating like I should have, and I was losing too much blood, and I passed out and went to the ER and found out that night. It was crazy and I was suffering from that for a while before it reached that point. I had the exact same thing except it became worse and I was constantly tired, not just during my time of the month. I was dizzy and vomiting a lot. I went to the doctor and got blood tests and very strong iron, 110 mg. It took almost a year for my iron levels to get back to normal. ADHD, primarily inattentive. Who'da thought? You can have ADHD without being hyper at all. Went through all of grade school with it and didn't find out until college when I decided to get checked with the school psychologist. Always just thought the problems I had were normal. Found out I have paroxysmal atrial fibrillation. I had experienced episodes of it before and didn't really think anything of it, but one day when I was studying cardiology for my EMT class it occurred again, right when I was reading about AFib. Looked at the symptoms and thought, holy shit, that's exactly what's going on. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.